Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the January meeting of the Development Management Committee. There's no practice alarm today, so if the alarm sounds, please go out through this door, and the meeting place is on the car park. If you have a mobile phone with you, turn it off, please, or turn it to silent. Just a little hint, there are no speakers around the room. The speakers are built into the little microphone machine. If you find it difficult to hear, pull it closer to you, and then you can hear from the speakers. And a warm welcome to the public watching our webcast. This meeting will be on our YouTube site and archived in line with the South Norfolk archive policy. An agenda has been published on our website, plus any updates, and today we have 5 applications. And this meeting is a meeting held in public, not a public meeting. So registered public speaking is in place, and it starts with the town or parish council, then objectors, then the applicant agent supporter, followed by the local district councillor. And you'll be invited to come forward to speak at the speaker's desk, and each group can speak for 5 minutes in total. And if you wish, you can use more than one speaker, but you have to be very careful with the time because we will cut it off at 5 minutes. We'll tell you with 1 minute to go as well, so you can get your timing. And all members, I can confirm, have received in advance the agenda, presentations, update sheet, and lobbying. And planning officer will present the key points of each application to the committee, and the members will determine by a show of hands the application before us today, and I will give you the result of that vote. And one important note is if you do intend to speak about an application, your name will be recorded in the minutes and kept on public indefinitely. So you'll be famous for a long time. Agenda, apologies please, Leah.
Yes, Chair, we've had apologies from absence from Councillor Graham, with Councillor Overton Neil substituting. We've got Councillor D. Thompson, Councillor Eddy, Councillor Blundell and Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. I have no urgent business. In declarations of interest, I'll declare on all members we've been lobbied on application 1 and application 2. Are there any other, Dave?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Mayor of Wymondham and also District Councillor for the area. In relation to number 1, I have had no conversations or any dispensations or interest regards that one.
Okay, thank you. Michael?
Similarly, I'm District Councillor for the area concerned, but I've had no conversations with anyone about it.
Thank you. Minutes of the last meeting. All the ones who were there all agreed with the minutes? Yeah. Fine. So now we're going to go to application number 1, which is land north of Croftway in Wymondham, and we have Glenn. So when you're ready, Glenn.
Oh, it's on. It's obviously a nervous microphone. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. So the application before you is for the construction of 110 affordable dwellings and associated works on land to the northwest of Croftway in Wymondham. From reading the update sheet, you'll be aware that matters relating to biodiversity net gain have been resolved. An additional objection received from Wymondham Heritage Society, but there's nothing particular for me to pick up in any of those. Feel like they've been already covered in the report. So the key considerations for this application really boil down to the principle of development, the planning history of the site and the impact on the landscape character of the area. Clearly there are other considerations which we'll pick up as they arise during this presentation. So as ever with me, we'll start off with the satellite plan, showing where the site is, just to the sort of north of centre in the red line, pretty much overlaying where it says Wymondham Rugby Club. You've got Norwich Common to the south of the site, which eventually heads into Heatherset. Wymondham Town Centre to the southwest, pretty much where it says Specsavers. A11 snaking across in the yellow line from the bottom of the screen to the right hand side of the screen. And then we've got some new developments as Wymondham has expanded in the last 10-15 years, immediately to the south and west of the site, which are more recent, and elsewhere in the sort of direction of Sealfield to the south and heading out towards Sutton to the west. In closer quarters, the site is within the middle of the screen. It's clearly arable farmland enclosed by trees and hedges. Got recently completed residential developments to the south and southwest, Wyndham Rugby Club to the west, and open countryside to the north and east. There's not really a significant change in levels, and that will be borne out as we see some photos of the site. This is an excerpt of the policies map from the Wyndham Area Action Plan. Got some annotations on it just to try and help you guide the site and see where it sits in relation to a couple of the policy constraints. So the site is in the top right-hand corner, indicated by this blue arrow. And then to the right of that is the strategic gap between Heatherset and Wyndham. So the site is entirely outside of that gap, next to it, but nevertheless outside. It's also outside the development boundary, but adjoining to it, and this is probably a good point to sort of jump into the principle of development. So you've got policy DM 1.3, which permits development in the countryside where an application complies with another policy and or allocation of the local plan. In this case, this is a wholly affordable housing exception site, which is permitted by policy DM 3.1 of the local plan and also policy 7.2 of the GNLP. The site is proposing to deliver, as I've said enough times already, a 100% affordable housing scheme for which there is an identified and evidenced need, which has the support of the Council's Housing Enabling Officer. But in addition to that, the other horse in the race is the fact that the Council doesn't have a 5-year housing land supply, which sort of tilts the balance further in favour of granting planning permission. And when you're looking at the 5-year supply, you have to exercise the tilted balance, which means a presumption in favour of granting planning permission unless the adverse impacts of doing so significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So that's a pretty high bar. And as we go through some of these early slides, I'll do a sort of a compare and contrast with the scheme that was dismissed on appeal in 2021. So on the left, we have the current application site. Just try and use the mouse. So for the one on the left, we've got 110 dwellings as opposed to 150 on the right-hand side. More areas of open space, as you can see. So the site is in 3 distinct blocks, also broken up by 3 distinct blocks of open space, unlike the one on the right, which is a much more sort of elongated form of built development. So it's going to have that bigger impact. We've got a perimeter path from the southwest corner, which is going to be an emergency access as well, which winds its way around the west, north and east of the site, provides access to the footpath network to the northwest as well, which complies with various policies of the Wyndham Neighbourhood Plan. And then if I start on the right-hand side, this is the one that was dismissed on appeal. You can see, if I just talk about what the shadings are. So with this one, we've got 3-storey dwellings, up to 3-storey dwellings along the spine road, up to 2.5-storey dwellings in the unhatched area, and then single-storey dwellings in the lighter blue area. The current application proposes that no dwelling will exceed 2 stories in height, and that's quite a significant difference. And there's a greater spread of bungalows across the site as well. So we've got on the eastern boundary, there's a handful of bungalows there, and then also along the northern boundary, which just assist in the sort of the transition of the site as it peters out into the countryside and lessening its impact. The dwelling size plan, section 1.8 of the report sets out the mix of dwellings, but this colour code nevertheless demonstrates that there's a decent mix of different types of property, a mixture of 1, 2 and 3 bed properties spread across the site. And then the split of affordable housing, if you can make that out either on your screen, on your computers or iPads, or on the bigger screens, shows which properties are affordable rent and which are shared ownership. So the ones which have been filled in with colour are the affordable rent and number 76, and the shared ownership, of which there will be 34, are shown with the dots. And again, you can see they're mixed up quite well together there. As we look at some of the property types and these two street scenes here, the houses take on a sort of fairly conventional form. That's no problem with that, they're not unattractive. Got a mixture of buff bricks, red bricks and render, and we'll see some cladding in some of the later ones. This street scene at the top is in the top right hand corner of the development, and then the one at the bottom is as soon as you come into the site via the vehicular access at the southern boundary, that is on your left hand side straight away. And then I'm just going to whiz through some of the other property types. So we've got a mixture of, again, 1, 2, 3 and 4 bed properties. These are the 1 bed bungalows, 2 bed houses, 3 bed houses, more 3 bed houses, and 4 bed houses. So again, you can see that they're fairly conventional in their appearance, and as we'll see as we start moving on to the photos, appropriate to those that have been built around it. So the landscape master plan, as a board number, the amount of open space exceeds the policy requirement that would otherwise be expected for this number of dwellings. It exceeds it by approximately 7,000 square metres, which isn't to be sniffed at. We've got the perimeter footpath going around west, north and east. Along the eastern side, there's proposed to be sort of various kind of trim trail type equipment, so everybody feels the need to be particularly active. They can do a bit of sort of balancing and get on some of the equipment on there, which is all good for health and well-being, which the GNLP largely supports. And we've got the access to the footpath network to the northwest too. Again, access to the countryside and being in and out amongst nature. And then the areas of open space also incorporate some of the drainage basins, and these will be multifunctional areas which will incorporate wildflower meadows in these two, an informal kickabout area in this one here, play equipment in this one, and then more of a wetland type feel on the northern side. But you can see there's other pockets of open space around the site too. So the tree strategy, I'm not sure this necessarily translates particularly well on the screen, but I suppose I indulged myself a little bit in the report when I referred to a green ribbon that runs through the site, but I actually believe it to be true. When you look at the trees that have been proposed to be planted, there's going to be 150 extra trees at least, and a significant number of other plants going in, but you can just see how that flows through the site from south to north to provide an attractive environment for the residents to live in. And then you've got these spurs going off east and west either way as well, which will also contribute to giving the site somewhat of a green feel and to filter some of the views of the properties and views in and out of the site. We're going to start looking at some photos now. So to begin with, in some of the early ones, it's probably worth bearing in mind or having in mind the impacts on residential amenity and also the comments of the inspector on the impacts on the character and appearance of the area and the hedgerow. So here's the proposed access into the site. You can see those properties on the left and right which were recently completed. Again, just try and remember what the type of the house types that we just saw and how consistent they're going to be with these. And the access is going to be very much right ahead of us where that close boarded wooden fence is. And to accommodate that, an approximately 30 metre stretch of hedgerow is going to be removed. Now that is going to cause harm to that hedge, there's no denying that, but as policy 4.8 of the local plan sets out, the loss of this and the harm arising from it needs to be weighed against the need for and the benefits of the development. As I've set out in the report, given that the development is meeting an identified need for affordable housing, my view is that both the needs and benefits of that affordable housing outweighs the loss of the hedge, regrettable as it is. I'm just standing to the right or the eastern end of the southern boundary of the site. This is a drainage lagoon on Strowger Loke. Oops, sorry, wrong way. And just in terms of some of the numbers to pick out from the report, we're looking at distances of between 24 and 31 metres, back-to-back distances between different between the house types. In today's world, that's an acceptable level of separation. Doesn't provide sufficient grounds on which to refuse the application under policy DM 3.13. And now we're going to start walking around the site. So this is the existing footpath in the southwest corner, which is going to be retained, and also will also provide the emergency access into the site as well. I've just moved in a bit closer. In that southwest corner, you can see the ditch, which appears to be quite well maintained around the site. Good whack of existing vegetation as well. You can just emphasise that the site is reasonably flat too. And a landscape and visual assessment was submitted as part of the application to try and assess what the impacts of the development be. Rest assured, the dwellings, as you've already seen, won't be grey blocks. They'll have a bit more colour to them than that. But nevertheless, the bottom one is on year 15 and shows what the planting will be like as it starts to mature, and that will be read as a continuation of the properties to the south. So this is the southern extent of the site. As we go, I've just stepped out the site on the western boundary. This track runs parallel with that and heads up, that runs between Wyndham Rugby Club and the application site, and eventually connects into the public footpath network as well. Slightly gappier, maybe on that southern extent on the left-hand side, but then as you start to progress further north, it becomes a bit thicker. This was taken last week, so if you like, this will be the worst it will ever be. And then during the summer, when the hedges and the trees are in leaf, that will start to thicken up and screen views further and filter views of the site. And I'm at the far northwest corner of the site as well, looking back down towards Croftway and Strowger Oak. And then the next images are taken from the landscape and visual assessment. Top one is year 1, bottom one year 15. And again, you can see that the planting in this image has matured. Clearly it's not going to screen what's there already, but it will at least start to soften views of it as well as it starts to mature. And I'm about 200 metres to the northwest of the site here, on the footpath. So if you were to sort of orientate yourself where the clubhouse is at Wyndham Rugby Club, I've probably just about walked past that, pivoted round, looking back towards the site, and you can see that even at this time of year, the site is very well screened, which demonstrates to me that the longer impacts are going to be, the longer distance impacts are going to be at a fairly low scale, and the impacts instead will be more localised. So as you look at the annotation, we're 580 metres away from the site to the northwest on Melton Road. Wyndham Rugby Club and the floodlights just there on the bottom image where that kind of white strip is. They're the advertising boards at the club, with the clubhouse, that block in the middle. And then you can just make out the blocks here once the development has been constructed. And what you can see, and is worth pointing out, is that they don't exceed the height of the trees in the background, which suggests to me that the landscape from this distance can absorb what's being proposed. Clearly, if they were 2.5 and 3-storey dwellings, we'd probably be having a different conversation, but 2 stories suggest that it can be assimilated successfully into the surrounding landscape. And then to emphasise the point on localised impacts, here's the view from the access into Wyndham Rugby Club. So this is the current situation. Year 1 at the top following completion, and then year 15 at the bottom. So what I'm not denying at all is that there aren't going to be impacts. Clearly the character of the site is going to change, as are the immediate impacts on the surrounding area. But it's that kind of calibration of where we see what the impacts might be. The inspector, when looking at the maximum impact of the previous application, obviously had concerns about up to 2.5 and 3-storey dwellings and the scale of development and the views across the countryside. This one is a sort of slightly different kettle of fish because there's more space between the dwellings and the scale of development is lower. And while accepting there'll be harm, I calibrate it to be moderately adverse as opposed to significantly adverse, which is permitted by policy DM 4.5 of the local plan. but we'll walk along the western boundary anyway. So here we are, more or less where the lagoon is going to be at the northern end of the site. So views looking towards the northeast corner. And at the risk of telling you what you already know, this is a pretty blunt instrument to try and demonstrate what I'm trying to say, because clearly we don't look in tunnels. We look in, our eyes have a wider view. So you can just see that view includes the views of the countryside to the north as well, just through the trees at this time of year. And then to the west, beg your pardon, in the middle part of the open space, looking across, so that red line here is roughly what I judge this area to be as well, but that will continue off screen to the right as it splays away to the south. And similarly, I've just sort of pivoted round to the right, and you can see that red line provides the tunnel that I said not to think about. And then I've headed over to the eastern boundary of the site, looking towards more or less where the southern boundary of the rugby club is. You've got this woodland belt here. Views of that will be retained. So ultimately, what I'm trying to reiterate is that there will be views across the site and outside of the site as a consequence of what's being proposed. And for completion, here is the drainage strategy. I suppose the best way to describe this is that everything to the south of a particular basin will discharge into a basin to the north. So everything in this bit will go in there, everything in this bit will go in there, and so on as the site continues. Surface water is going to be discharged into the local drainage network, which discharges out to the northwest at a restricted rate, and the idea is that these drainage lagoons aren't going to hold water for significant periods of time, so they will have a half drain down time of 24 hours, meaning that they'll be able to just discharge the water pretty quick. So finally, some key items for you to consider: the principle of development and the planning history, the housing mix layout and appearance, the impact on the character and appearance of the area, and residential amenity. So there are matters that I've not referred to in this report, in this presentation, that I've referred to in my report, and I've done that for the sake of brevity, and I've limited myself really to what I think are the real kind of key considerations. But nevertheless, to recap, the general principle of development is acceptable under policy 7.2 and DM 1.3 of the local plan. Application is also acceptable in respect of its impacts on flood risk, highway safety, residential amenity, trees and ecology. So the benefits also outweigh the loss of that 30-metre stretch of hedgerow along the southern boundary, but also acknowledge, as I've said, that the character and appearance of the site and the immediate area will change. Also required to exercise the tilted balance. So the application is policy compliant. In addition to that, don't have a 5-year land supply, need to exercise the tilted balance. Acknowledge there will be harm to the character and appearance of the area, but I judge that to be moderate as opposed to significant. And neither individually or cumulatively, I don't think there will be significant or demonstrable harms that will outweigh the benefits of what's being proposed, Chair, which, to emphasise, is a 100% affordable housing scheme that will be secured by a Section 106 agreement. And subject to the caveats in my report, the application is ultimately recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Can I just ask one quick question in terms of the housing, the affordable housing? Is there going to be a local connection cascade on this site, and will that be in perpetuity?
It's an exception site to meet needs for Wyndham, and so there will be, as part of that Section 106 agreement, there will be that cascade arrangement, yeah.
Members? Oh, lots of questions. Start with John.
Glenn, on the children's play space area, on the equipment that's going to be supplied, will that be Saffron's responsibility to maintain and replace forever and a day?
We will deal with that as part of the Section 106 agreement, the future management and maintenance of all of the open space, including the play equipment. I think it's likely that Saffron will retain that, but they're here, so they might be able to answer that for themselves a bit later.
Lisa?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. I just was looking through the document, and the previous application obviously went to a planning inspector who dismissed it. But I just wanted to check on the previous application, there was 3-storey homes. I couldn't see any in the pictures that you showed me, but am I right with that there are going to be no longer any 3-storey homes?
That's correct. It's worth bearing in mind that the previous application was an outline, so we didn't have elevations to show, but that blue plan that I showed with the different shadings showed that dwellings could be up to 3-storey. For this one, no dwelling will exceed 2 stories in height. So if you like, will be a conventional house.
Dave?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, 2 for me. One's probably more of a comment regards something on the report, and that's regards Wyndham Health Centre, where they say they're would need some expansion for the additional people. I don't know if you know Wyndham Health Centre, but everything's around it. There's no way that site can expand. So that's an interesting comment that they want expansion, which they can't effectively have. The other one is a bit concerning is the highways one, where they don't feel it's appropriate for a crossing on the Norwich Common area. There's been more than one incident on that road now for children and parents crossing for a bus. And a lot of this site is going to be rented, which probably leads to families and children that are going to want to be getting transport to the local schools in the main part of the town. Yet it's not appropriate to put a crossing to get to that bus stop across a road, which inevitably is going to be becoming busier and busier.
Yeah, I mean, I'll come to the second one in a minute, so just remind me what your first point was.
It's the fact that Wyndham Health Centre sort of like they put that they need expansion on a site that, well, can't expand.
Yeah, I mean, I agree it's a constrained site from what I know of it, but nevertheless, following a conversation I had with them, and this is reported in the consultation section, they withdrew that request, being aware that the application is to meet needs in Wyndham, so people are probably already there. As far as the need for a crossing is concerned, that didn't go left. That stone wasn't left unturned as part of this application. Vision Norfolk and others, and Councillor Savage, have all raised that with me directly, and I've also raised that directly with the Highway Authority. They didn't feel that in highway safety terms that was necessary to make the development acceptable. Whether you agree or not with that is another matter, but if the Highway Authority isn't asking for it, it makes it very difficult for me to ask for it to make the development acceptable, but I get what you're saying.
Michael? No? I don't. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Glenn. So we're going to move into public speaking, and we have Sarah. Hello, Sarah. If you'd like to come forward to the public speaking desk, please. Sarah is an objector to the site. If you use the one in the middle, please. And if you just pull it a bit closer to you, the machine. And you've got 5 minutes. We'll warn you with 1 minute to go. And when you press the button, please give your name for the record. Yeah, that's it, you're on.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Dr. Sarah Knapp, and I'm a local resident who lives very close to the proposed development. And I would like to speak outlining my views and those of many other local residents in the community. I strongly object to this proposal for the following reasons. The first is environmental. The effect of the proposal on the existing rural ambience of the current development and surrounding area by extending a further urban sprawl into the open land and reducing green spaces, thereby impacting on the well-being of existing residents. There will be a significant impact and further encroachment of the wildlife habitat from the hedgerows and fields, particularly affecting birds, bats, frogs, hedgehogs, foxes and other animals that have already been substantially affected by development in this area. A 30-metre section of hedgerow, as we've already heard, will be removed to create the vehicular access and footpaths. This amounts to twice as much hedgerow being destroyed than previously proposed. In the previous application, 15 metres was estimated, and this application was refused on initial application and on appeal, with this one of the reasons why permission was rejected. Secondly, access and traffic implications. The proposal details that access will be via Croft Way, which will have a significant impact on the volume of traffic coming from Briggsmead, making a quiet developmental street into a much, much busier road. There are already considerable issues with parking and speeding along Briggsmead, and the proposed 110 additional houses could make the situation far, far worse. In addition, there is a children's playground on Briggsmead, very close to where the access road will be, and this could lead to a potential danger to children who inadvertently may step into the path of a large number of additional oncoming vehicles. Thirdly, inadequate provision of infrastructure and local services such as health centres, dentists and schools. As a practising medical professional, I'm only too aware of these issues. I note that the Integrated Care Board have highlighted this when they responded to the planning application. They said, and I quote, "Wymondham Health Centre is at capacity on clinic room use. Further expansion of the population in the area will require consideration to the creation of additional space by way of extension on the site." This has already been covered briefly. This was followed by assurances that the development is to support existing residents of Wymondham by allocating the properties to people already locally resident or people with a strong connection to the town. This should therefore have a reduced impact on healthcare capacity compared to a standard development, but this does not mean it will have no impact. On a personal note, to illustrate this point, it took me 18 months to be able to register with a private dentist after moving here. I didn't even try to register with an NHS one. Fourthly, planning permission for this site has been turned down previously, as we all know, by South Norfolk Council, including on appeal in 2021. The main reasons for the dismissal were, and I quote again, "The development would result in significant harm to the character and appearance of the countryside, and the development would result in the loss of a significant section of hedgerow that is likely to be important." These, of course, are still present. The only differences are that this proposal is for entirely affordable housing. The number of stories has been reduced from 3 to 2, and there is a reduction of the number of proposed houses by a small amount, from 150 to 110. Fifthly, the existing developments of Elm Farm and Beckett's Grove already have a significant proportion of affordable
1 minute to go.
homes. On Elm Farm, where I live, 99 out of the 299 homes built are designated affordable housing. There are also other social housing developments very close by, including on the old Wymondham Rugby Club site off Tuttle's Lane. I absolutely understand the need for further affordable housing provision, but I would argue that there is already a more than adequate supply in this particular locality. And sixthly, the potential that developers will use the acceptance of planning on this site as a gateway to further development to the east of the Rugby Club and along Melton Road. The site is within a countryside location and outside the development limits for Wymondham. I very much hope that the committee will consider these reasons for objection, views which are shared amongst the local residents. Ultimately, I strongly urge the committee to reject this proposal. Thank you very much.
Brilliant timing. Well done. Just stay for a second because there might be some judgment. Any questions? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just to make sure I heard right, did you say the previous hedgerow was rejected at 15?
Yeah.
That's okay. I just want to make sure not 15, not 50.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any more? No, thank you very much. If you'd like to go and take your place
Thank you
again.
very much.
Now we've got Joe and Louisa. Are you both going to speak or just one? Both. So be careful of the timing. Don't leave them stranded. And when you do start talking, please give your name for the record. So 5 minutes and we'll warn you with 1 minute to go.
Good morning, members. My name is Louisa Nelson, Senior Planner to Ingleton Wood. I'm joined today by my client Joe Boobman, Commercial Director at Saffron Housing Trust. We would like to begin by thanking council members for the opportunity to speak this morning and to thank the officer for his comprehensive presentation and report. I will not repeat those details, but instead focus on some key points to assist members in their deliberation. As you have heard, this application seeks full planning permission for 110 much-needed affordable homes in a sustainable location adjacent to the settlement of Wymondham. The principle of development is therefore supported under Policy 7.2 of the Greater Norwich Local Plan, which allows for rural exception sites where they meet an evidenced local need. That need has been clearly demonstrated through the Housing Needs Study and fully endorsed by your Housing Enabling Officer. Furthermore, this scheme will provide a valuable contribution towards the Council's housing land supply. In preparing the details of this scheme, we have worked closely with the local planning authority and key stakeholders. As such, significant work has been undertaken to inform the application that is receiving a positive recommendation today. The proposed development has been carefully designed as a landscape-led scheme, which would provide natural and logical extension to the town. The design has been shaped by the site's rural edge and its relationship with the surrounding countryside. The layout is deliberately loose, with development arranged in 3 distinct parcels, separated by green corridors and attenuation basins. As acknowledged by the Senior Heritage and Design Officer, the design approach results in a high number of properties fronting onto green space, which is beneficial and will help to create an attractive and healthy environment. This landscape-led approach will also result in improved accessibility around the site through new footpath and public right-of-way connections, leading to significant benefits for the wider community. The proposals deliver just shy of 2 hectares of open space, which includes equipped play areas, trim trails, circular walking routes and species-rich planting, as well as 158 new trees. 5 basins will incorporate wildflower meadows and wetland habitats, creating a high-quality setting and achieving over 37% biodiversity net gain in habitat units. In conclusion, this proposal represents a sustainable and inclusive form of development that complies with adopted local and national planning policies, both of which strongly emphasise the importance of affordable housing delivery. The design responds sensitively to its setting, and the application has addressed all key technical matters. Indeed, there are no technical objections from statutory consultees, and the scheme has received a recommendation for approval by the Town Council. There are therefore no significant impacts that outweigh the vast benefits and no valid planning reasons as to why this application should not be approved. I therefore respectfully request that members support the Officer's recommendation and grant planning permission subject to the conditions outlined. Thank you.
Thank you, Louisa, and good morning, members. My name is Joe Bootman, and I'm Director for the Development Team at Saffron Housing Trust, which is a not-for-profit registered provider of social housing and charity based here in South Norfolk. We own and manage almost 7,000 social homes across the region, including around 700 in Wymondham alone. The acute need for more social housing, both nationally and locally, is a matter of established fact. In South Norfolk, the average price of a 2-bedroom property is almost 6 times the average household income, and over 7 times average household income for a 3-bedroom property. Social housing is needed to provide safe, warm and affordable homes, not only for those on the very lowest incomes, but also for an increasing proportion of society whose needs are not met by the mainstream housing market. The local housing needs analysis for Wymondham supporting this application demonstrates 114 households are currently living in unsuitable housing, but unable to afford their own home, and there is projected to be a minimum requirement of at least 35 additional affordable homes per year over the next 15 years beyond that which is already planned for. The proposed scheme will deliver 110 genuinely affordable homes secured in perpetuity through a Section 106 agreement with priority for local people and those with a local connection. This will ensure families can stay close to their support networks, older residents can downsize without leaving the community, and key workers can live near their jobs. Over 2/3 of the homes will be for social rent, which is the most affordable form of social housing. The remainder will be shared ownership, which is part buy, part rent, and designed to give an affordable route to home ownership, with the purchaser's initial equity share as low as 10%. This will deliver a balanced mix of accommodation to meet the identified affordable housing needs for the town. The scheme will provide a high quality and healthy environment for residents to live in that is well located in relation to the existing settlement and close to transport links, with generous green open spaces and accessible homes built to modern standards. All homes will be environmentally sustainable with renewable technologies including low carbon heat pumps and solar panels. In summary, this development will make a significant difference to Wymondham in delivering homes that local people desperately need and supporting inclusive community cohesion. We hope you will support the application and enable us to make the proposed benefits into a reality. Thank you.
Members' thoughts and consideration, and kindly it's been left up the key considerations, and I think to add to that we have 5-year land supply, which is very important as well. So, members, any thoughts, comments?
Sorry, Chair, just because it wasn't attached, so I've gone hunting for the original planning decision on this. And a lot of things are covered, things like 3 stories and that sort of stuff. However, one of the big concerns of the planning inspectorate was the hedgerow, and we're taking away more than was rejected by the inspectorate last time. So that's my only concern on that. I appreciate we've got ecology things being put in place, but we seem to be taking more hedgerow than even the inspectorate found unacceptable last time. Just my view on that.
Can I just clarify, sorry?
Yeah.
Having reread the appeal decision, it was quite clear that that inspector acknowledged and found harm for the loss of the hedgerow, but concluded that the benefits of the scheme outweighed the loss of the hedgerow. So they didn't consider there wasn't a harm. They considered there was one, but actually it was outweighed. And that is what Glenn has continued to do in this assessment. There is harm in terms of loss of hedgerow. The benefits of this scheme actually are greater than was previously considered by the inspector, because this is 100% affordable housing. So that is that balance. So we're acknowledging there are harms as a result of it, but it is outweighed in terms of that planning balance.
And there is a planting programme, I think you mentioned 58 trees, was it?
It's 158 trees and then over 2,000 other plants going around the site as well.
Okay.
Just one other thing as well, and it's based on what other developers, I appreciate this is a different developer, but bird and bat boxes, are they to be installed in properties? Because there's the ecology on there, but it doesn't make clear sort of, because previously with other estates, they've not installed them, people buy the house and then they can't install them because they need permission of the house owner. So I think the ecology thing, we're putting it there, it's making sure we're actually doing that, because once someone, effectively, some of them are rented, easy, because that's still Saffron's ownership, but if we got properties that are being bought and they've not been installed, then we lose that ability to install those, because effectively it's owned by someone privately then.
Yeah, I mean, the mitigation suggests installing them at properties, which we'll seek to secure by condition.
Sorry, the button doesn't seem to work on my microphone. So just going back to the issue of the housing need, which I think you've established, I would like a little more information from officers. It's quite key in the consideration, really. It looks like quite a fine margin in terms of the number of people identified as needing this as compared to the size of the development. I'm surprised, because my personal knowledge of Wymondham suggests that actually there's greater need than you've identified. I just wonder how you've gone about identifying that need, and if you could explain to me where that figure of 114 comes from.
Chair, perhaps the best person to answer the question is the person who is behind me, Mr. Bootman, who would have undertaken the survey or commissioned that survey along with Keith Mitchell. So is it permissible for him to answer that?
Can you just explain who Keith is?
Keith is our housing enabling officer, so he would have been...
Just for... Yeah, we'll allow you to talk about that.
Thank you. So the housing need has been identified through a study carried out by Opinion Research Services using the same data and methodology which underpins the housing need study for the existing adopted GNLP. Follows that same format but with a sub-area analysis for Wymondham alone. That is based on a demographic study. Generally, it will underplay need because it is only looking at kind of, I suppose, reported need as opposed to need in the community, which isn't necessarily identified and come forward and brought forward at that time, in the same way as a housing register will only provide you with information at a time. The analysis seeks to turn that into a flow as opposed to a snapshot. It does say in the report that this is a minimum identified need. There is likely to be greater need than that, but they've taken a precautionary approach in there. An exception site would generally look to be delivering affordable housing need over a 5-year period. So on the basis of the 35 additional homes per year over the 5-year period, we're actually delivering under the required need in this instance, but that's balancing what we can deliver in terms of meeting need against the constraints of the landscape-led nature of the site.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Lisa?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to support this application. I think when you look at it, it's 100% affordable housing scheme. We're often fighting against developers who say that they can't provide the affordable housing that we want because it's not viable. So I think this is a really good scheme. We know that there's plenty of people out there who are desperate for housing that they can afford. I appreciate there's concerns for the environment and wildlife, but I believe with the additional trees and planting that is in the application, and bat and bird boxes, hedgehog gaps, they're doing things to actually help with that. And once again, I understand that the previous application was refused, but as we all know, things have changed considerably since then. We have no 5-year land supply. We have a new proposed MPPF, which will be coming out soon, that basically tells us that we have to approve applications unless there's serious adverse effects, and in this application, Chair, I can't see any serious that wouldn't outweigh the positives. Thank you.
John?
Glenn, on 4.5, I know there is the presence of a veteran oak tree. Has that got a TPO on it?
No, Councillor Overton, and the reason for that is because the tree is not under threat. It's on the other side of the ditch to the application site, so it's planned. It's kind of in this area, just where the cursor is.
So not within the site? No.
Yeah, it's the other side of the boundary, other side of the ditch to the site, so it's just kind of a natural constraint.
It won't cause any issues to a developer?
No. So I'm saying it with confidence, no.
Recommendation is to authorise Assistant Director of Planning to approve subject to matters relating to nutrient neutrality being satisfactorily resolved. Any updates needed following the publication of the new NPPF, subject to the satisfactory completion of a Section 106 agreement and subject to conditions. All those in favour?
Chair, that's unanimous.
So that's unanimous. Thank you. And thank you to the people who came today. So if we can move to item number 2, which is land south of the street, Gillingham, Norfolk. Just wait a second, Richard. Okay, Richard, off you go.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an application for outline planning permission for residential development with a school expansion, area of land, some open space, landscaping and highway improvements, with all matters reserved except for access at land south of the street, Gillingham, Norfolk. Access is to be proposed as located via Daisy Way, a private road which also serves a collection of 22 properties, including those on Tulip Close. So this is the site as shown in the committee papers. This is the location plan showing the site to the south of existing development that is set off the street and Geldstone Road. This older and newer estate housing at respectively the Boundaries, which is the western portion, and Daisy Way stroke Tulip Close on the eastern portion. This shows the site etched red relative to wider development within Gillingham. Key bus routes are shown by yellow lines stroke arrows. In particular, a short walking distance to the east gives a good frequent collection of buses along Loddon Road, including the X2, X21 and X22, which connect to Beccles and onwards to Lowestoft. In the opposite direction, the buses connect to Norwich. This slide shows the allocated site within the Emerging Village Clusters Plan, which has now reached the advanced Regulation 19 stage, where examination hearings across the clusters plan have begun. This slide shows the development relative to the Broads National Park area, with the nearest point still over 100 metres away to the south. This slide shows the site relative to the conservation area, as set further to the northeast on the opposite far side of the A146 Norwich Road. There are a collection of listed buildings here and also in sections of existing built-up development to the east of the site, as indicated. The built development and the built environment and substantive vegetation in the conservation area ensure that development would not be detrimentally impacting upon these heritage assets. This is another slide showing a clearer map of the extent of the conservation area, set some distance from the development and heavily tree lined as part of its character to the northeast. This slide shows the local footpath connections with Geldeston Footpath 9, linking with Gillingham Footpath 12 through the site, and that's mainly on its southern side. So I have a collection of photos to show you before we get to the layout plan, just to give you some context of the area. We will start at the street where the yellow star is near to the junction with Daisy Way. We will move through Daisy Way before returning to the street and taking a broadly clockwise circular look around the site. So looking east on the street now with access to Daisy Way just there on the right hand side. This is a view more south now through Daisy Way itself. Again now moving through Daisy Way and again looking south towards the gated access point of the proposed development at the far end. This is a similar but slightly clearer image from Google Street View of that same view south. Now at the point of the access, St Michael's Primary Academy is set beyond the trees in the image here, more towards the west. Panning round more to the south again, showing the existing field. Further to the south again. And now towards the southeast. Back onto the street now and looking over the boundary where Tulip Close is, an area of public open space and children's play area. Further along the street, looking over hedgerows towards where an open land area separates the site and further development on the street, which is to the east. Within this area, a temporary construction access is proposed to serve the development in its build-out separate to Daisy Way. So further along the street, near to where a crossing point would be provided to the services site on the northeast side via the existing footpath that serves that development. The view here is towards the southwest. View again southwest at a point where the temporary construction access is proposed. Just panning around a bit further to the south now at that same general point. This view towards the street. Moving down the street a little bit, a closer image of the proposed construction access point. and a view looking north now on the street still, and you can just see obviously the existing context in terms of where that temporary construction access road would route. This view here is northwest, at a point where footpath 12 connects with the street. Just moving a bit further down the street, and this is the view west back to the site. Further to the east along the street, this shows the junction of Helmet Way. We are a bit further from the site at this point, where the provision of off-street parking bays is proposed as part of a suite of highway improvement measures. View west of the same Helmet Way junction with the streets. So we've gone back west now and back to the site itself, off the street, and we're now on footpath 12, and this is the view towards the west. So now set adjacent and within the southern edge of the development proposed, and this view is looking north back towards Daisy Way, the primary academy just beyond the trees there, and the boundaries. View more to the northwest now, the boundaries now in the distance. Turning round back towards the east, this shows where footpath 12 routes along the southern edge of the site. We're just off the far corner of the site now, looking east over a bridge walkway over the existing ditch system. View to the north, the boundaries estate is shown. And into the far northwest corner of the site, broadly southeast, looking southeast. The Broads boundary is on the horizon in the far distance. View from that same point within the edge of the Broads. The existing dwellings are in the distance at Daisy Way, just about within sight to the north. So now to the layout, proposed layout. This is indicative. Please note this indicative layout is with the base that all matters are to be reserved other than the access proposed of Daisy Way. It shows 44 dwellings and the expansion of the school with land on the south side of the existing school grounds. The residential access, as said, the permanent access is via Daisy Way, and the construction access, temporary, is via the street. This slide shows the package of off-site highway measures, including dedicated bay parking within verge areas along the streets, a crossing point to the services, widening and extension of footpaths along the streets, and a 20-mile-per-hour speed restriction. I should note that we do have Graham Woolsford here from NCC Highways if you've got any questions, but this is further to work that's been identified by that consultee and has been agreed by the applicant. This is a closer view of the dedicated parking improvements at and around the junction of the street and Helmet Way. This slide shows the EA mapping of fluvial flood risk relative to the site. The developable area, aside from the temporary construction access and the existing footpath FP12, are set outside of flood zones 2 and 3. Again, EA mapping here showing surface water flood risk. In the southeast corner, the water being more notable where historically some flood attenuation has occurred. The proposed attenuation basin helps to utilise this natural topography to store runoff surface water before being released to the ditch network at the Greenfield runoff rate via hydro brake system, as all approved, accepted by the lead local flood authority, the Environment Agency and the Water Management Alliance in consultation. A small area of surface water flooding has also been recognised in the southwestern site, and this is designed into the indicative scheme through the provision of open space. This slide shows the proposed surface water drainage scheme and the provision of that attenuation basin. This slide shows the onward connections into the ditch network system in the control of the Waveney, Lower Yare and Loverinland Drainage Board, part of the Water Management Alliance. This slide shows the services site to the north east of the development as heard by this committee in July 2025. This scheme was approved, but it's currently subject to legal challenge via the High Court. A third development for a smaller speculative residential development, 25 dwellings to the north side of the street and the west of this service area, has been withdrawn. Cumulatively, the report considers how the developments have been considered in the rounds together, and that's at 5.126 and 5.127 of the report. So back to the proposed development and the indicative layout slide. The tilted balance has had to be engaged here as the District Council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. Local Plan Policy DM 1.3 also highlights that new development in the countryside should be permitted where it demonstrates overriding benefits in economic, social and environmental dimensions. The Council's decision maker here should appraise whether any of the impacts identified of granting planning permission would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. In terms of those impacts, and some low to moderate impact has been identified upon the landscape visual impact as identified in the report. Other impacts such as flood risk and highways have been mitigated through design and off-site highway improvements. A number of benefits have been identified, including the development of the sustainably sited housing, the economic support to the local economy this would bring, and the expansion of the school land to provide a more sustainable footing for the growth and support of the school going forward. Ecological enhancements and biodiversity gains are also factored in. Given the absence of a 5-year housing land supply and the tilted balance engaged on this emerging allocated site in the village clusters plan, the application is put forward for approval, subject to conditions, and additional requirements are set out in the recommendation. And lastly, Chair, just as per the update sheet, the recommendation is to further updated that the conditions applied would not include conditions 12, 13 and 14, which had been suggested by myself, but clarification by Highways since the report was written over Christmas confirms these are actually not required. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. Members, questions to Richard? Questions only? We'll go first with you, Michael. And then Lisa.
Yeah, sorry, you've mentioned 3 conditions that aren't required. Could you just elaborate on what they are, please, and why they're not required?
Yep, so that's conditions as listed at the back of the report, 12, 13 and 14. They basically relate to highways who would normally oversee the provision of the estate being laid out to a certain degree of detail, which they would obviously look to approve and consult with us as part of discharge conditions. Because this is being served off Daisy Way, which is a private road, they would expect this development as proposed to be a private road network. So for that reason, those conditions, which they hadn't actually requested during the actual application, wouldn't be required. Graham Woolsford could talk a bit more about that if required, but essentially it is just around the sort of the detail around that would normally be part of the legal process where highways adopt streets.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rich, can you just go back to, I probably missed where you said it was, the surface water map, where you can see the sort of flood areas going through. Can you, with your cursor, just show me where the actual site is on that map?
Yep, sure. So the site is right from the edge of the footpath on the western boundary, and it comes along the boundaries, the southern edge of the boundaries, along to Daisy Way, down to the edge of where the corner plot is on Tulip Close, and then it basically takes a southern point down to the ditch network system before returning back up. So the area that that we're looking at is this little bit here. Now that's in the indicative layout as open space. So that surface water flow has been identified, and obviously there's going to be no built development as part of that. For most parts of the year, that will be dry and accessible, but obviously recognising that flow system, we have obviously, purposely avoided any development in that area.
So, is there going to be any properties sort of at that lower scoop, which is the big blue high chance of surface water? Is there any properties going to be built, on the edge there, so that their back of their properties or front of their properties could be risk of, well, I don't know whether they'd obviously have mitigations to try and stop that from happening, but if there's a high chance, that means could be, I don't know, wet or boggy sort of there.
Yeah, no, I realise I probably should put one of the maps from the flood risk assessment in, which would have been better actually, but because this was the up-to-date flood mapping from the EA, decided to use this. But essentially, yes, no, none of that surface water flow path encroaches on the actual built area of development. You'll also notice where there's a sort of natural dip in the topography, historically there has been a collection of water in this sort of area here nearer to the streets. Obviously that is well outside of the site itself. There is only the footpath that routes through that area, but in terms of built development there's nothing that would encroach on that area, which is also flood zone 2 and 3 in terms of fluvial flood risk as well as surface water flood risk. The drainage pond actually will help to build off that initial baseline, so it will help to store water and then it will release water via the greenfield runoff rate into the ditch system. So everything drains down towards the southeast, but certainly the actual built form, including the roads, do not impinge on that area. That's what the EA were very careful with in terms of their consultation when we consulted with them through the flood modelling exercise.
Anyone? Okay, Michael.
Yeah, coming back to the highways improvements, can you confirm to me what the improvements are for improving the access to the school? Obviously, there'd be an increase of traffic, and I'd like to know what sort of widened footpath, what sort of things you got in mind?
Yeah. So, yeah, essentially there are a number of improvements in terms of the footpaths. There is, you probably won't pick up very well in the detail there, but, and again, Graham can talk about this if required, but there's essentially some extra footpath being added in here to improve the sort of sections that are missing, where you sort of route to school through Daisy Way. There was some discussion at the very early stages of whether it would be advisable to have a direct connection into the school expansion lands for, more pedestrian movements for, obviously children to access the school from the southern side. I think there was genuine concern from residents of Daisy Way that would effectively amount to an easy area for sort of school drop-off via private car, so we avoided that, quite rightly so I feel. So we do take the access through the footpaths through Daisy Way via the shared surface onto the street and then onto the boundary. So there are some improvements there. In terms of the sort of wider collection of footpath improvements, all of the street on this sort of slalom section would be improved for footpath widening. So not just residents of the proposed development, but existing school children as well who would otherwise walk to school will benefit from all these widened areas. There will be a safer crossing point to services as well. And then obviously the off-street parking measures will help, hopefully, take some of that pressure off the street in terms of the current parking demands. So that would further improve the sort of pedestrian sort of flow, if you like, through the street where otherwise you've got, a number of parked cars. So I think all in all, there are a number of improvements here. The 20-mile-an-hour speed restriction will have a significant benefit as well. So yes, in terms of obviously what we've done is we've just identified what highways have really requested.
Thank you.
Is that 20 a reduction in what it is now?
It is. It's
So it's going down
reducing
from
from
30 to
yeah.
20. Any more Questions? No. So we're going to go into public speaking, and I've got Andrea. Hello, Andrea. So you're going to have 5 minutes. We'll warn you with 1 minute to go, and when you turn on the microphone, please give your name for the record. Off you go.
Andrea Dipple, objection on behalf of local residents and Friends of Gillingham Countryside CIC. Gillingham is a village with two distinct areas, the larger centre, then separated by open agricultural land, a smaller area to the west. There is a service area to the north, with planning for substantial additional development. An application for residential development north of the street has recently been withdrawn but could be resubmitted. Insufficient consideration has been given to the cumulative effects of all this expansion. Covering 44 dwellings on agricultural land, this application was first submitted in October 22. 3 years is a lengthy application process for local residents. This timeframe indicates just how challenging it has been to remove objections from key statutory consultees, implying that the proposal is inherently flawed and against policy. It's a large-scale development outside the defined village boundary, resulting in incursion into open countryside, out of character with the form and character of the village, and to the detriment of the wider landscape setting, including the Broads. The proposal would have an unacceptable impact on highway safety, would significantly adversely affect local residents, and does not enable sustainable transport patterns. The development would be at risk of flooding and increased flooding elsewhere. The proposal therefore does not represent sustainable development. The draft village clusters plan is not yet adopted and carries no weight. Having more than a sufficient supply of housing land over the next 5.87 years, the benefit in providing additional housing is significantly and demonstrably outweighed by the adverse impacts identified. It's therefore requested that planning permission be refused. Gillingham is defined as a service village in the core strategy. The village boundary is in two separate areas, divided by open countryside. The application site sits within the smaller area that currently has circa 55 dwellings. This includes the 22 new homes, which were originally only meant to be 10 houses in the South Norfolk Village Cluster Plan. The proposal for another 44 within the smaller western section would increase this total number by 80% and does not respect the form and character of the village in greatly expanding the smaller area separate from the village core. The proposal is contrary to adopted policies, including Policy 15, which seeks to enable sustainable development, is beyond the village boundary and is not small in scale. The development results in an incursion into open countryside between the two village areas of built form and would add significant urbanisation to the smaller area, contrary to Policy 17 on smaller rural communities and countryside. Policy 18 seeks to maintain and enhance the Broad, which includes King's Dam, but the proposal introduces inappropriate urban development into the countryside, contrary to the objectives of the core strategy. The Housing Land Supply Assessment identifies that the district has housing land supply of 5.87 years. Adopted policies are therefore up to date and the tilted balance is therefore not engaged and should be refused. Describing the school expansion land as being a significant contributory point of benefit is misguided, given that the cost of that expansion will far outweigh the benefits and is therefore extremely unlikely to incur. Indeed, there are now spaces already available at the school. Access and highways. The proposed highways measures don't address any of the concerns raised by many objectors. The acute blind bend and on-street parking on the street were both cited as reasons not to score highly for the north site. Exactly the same conditions apply to the current proposal and the same highway objections therefore arise. The access arrangements and proposed highway works do not address these issues. They also do not allow for at least 2 points of access as raised by the Norfolk Highways teams. Some of the proposed features, such as bus stops at junctions, are intrinsically unsafe. Daisy Way is a private managed road and it is a legal matter as to whether access for traffic other than farm traffic is actually lawful and would be open to challenge. Democracy. 149 objections have been raised, which is huge in the scale of Gillingham as a village. Many residents have had to object multiple times during the 3 years. No consideration has been given to the strength of feeling or addressing the concerns raised by local residents. Gillingham and Gelderston parish councils have strongly objected. The few supporting submissions are not residents of the local area and should not be considered as relevant. Impacts on ecology, particularly on great crested newts, have not been fully examined for this site as the nearest established pond was not tested. Clear evidence of their presence was found in Daisy Way. Full testing and assessment of the potential impacts of the development should be undertaken prior to determination on this application. It is therefore requested that planning permission be refused. That was at pace.
Thank you. Could I just ask, I missed the figure that you stated for our 5-year land supply.
It's 5.87 years.
Can I ask where you actually got that figure from?
We were advised by a planning consultant and she identified that the district had 5.87 years.
Yeah, okay. We don't have a 5-year land supply. That's not the correct figure. Just wanted to clarify that so that you're aware. You know, I can ask the officer where that's calculated and where it comes from, and he can tell you what it is. Would you mind, Richard?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
I mean, at the moment we have a 4.85 years land supply. That's quite clear. We've documented that as of April last year. So whether, I know obviously this application has been in some time, so whether that planning consultant was advising at an earlier stage, you know, we did have a point where we felt through the GNLP we did have a 5-year land supply, and that was nearer to the figure that's been mentioned, but that was back in March 2024 when the GNLP was released. So yeah, certainly at the moment, as of April last year, it's 4.85, and we've documented that as on our website.
Yeah, just wanted to.
Okay. Any more, Michael?
Yeah, could I just check in with the officers? I think the issue's been raised about the school places and as to whether or not this expansion would actually take place. Can you remind me of the number of pupils at the school and why there's a need for additional places?
Yeah, I believe there was, it's basically a very small school. I think when we consulted Norfolk County Council obligations team, this was obviously back at the start of the application, the school was at capacity, so that might have changed slightly. I believe it was something like 57 places were on the school roll, and I think they were at capacity by just exceeding that. I think it was about 61 off memory. So this was really more about trying to sort of safeguard any future provision. Obviously, school numbers do change and fluctuate year to year, but I think from what I understood, it was you know, it was a school that was highly regarded in the local community. That's not to say that people do have a choice these days. I think possibly the size of it does constrain it, and it was felt that obviously the land would provide a benefit in terms of obviously both expansion of classrooms, but also more open space, which the school definitely doesn't have. So yes, as far as I know, although I don't have an absolute up-to-date figure, I think it's certainly you know, around capacity.
Thank you.
Richard, did the sufficiency team also mention the birth rate falling in any context there? Because it's a serious issue in Norfolk at the moment.
Yeah, they didn't. I know on some schools they have struggled to attract you know, school children as the years have fluctuated, but I think they don't tend to sort of go into the level of detail. It's more what at the time in terms of what the capacity is and whether they would like to you know, seek any sort of contribution to accommodate further children. I think when we consulted them, obviously the expansion was proposed as part of that, so they were very, very keen to obviously secure that, and they did see that as an added benefit. So I think hopefully that will allow for 1 or 2 extra classrooms. So hopefully, you know, it would allow that fluctuation. Developments like this, that would obviously bring a bit more pressure to the school. So yeah, hopefully that will give the school a better offer as well, and can, you know, maintain its role.
And can you confirm, we've just been talking about affordables, can you just confirm the affordable percentage on here?
Yeah, so it's 33% affordable housing, so that's policy compliant. Obviously that will be secured through the Section 106. Because this is an indicative layout, we don't actually know exactly which plots, but they have, you know, obviously agreed to the full policy compliant quota.
Thank you. Have we any more questions, Dave?
Sorry, Chair, one I picked up on. Probably it's what's been brought up for the officer. 3.4, which says the South Norfolk Village Clusters Housing Allocations Plan. Is that what the lady's referring to that's in draft? And if that's the case, why is it on here as a policy that's been given consideration?
So it's an emerging plan, it's the village clusters plan. Obviously, we've got to a very advanced stage, Regulation 19, so we've got the hearings actually during January as we speak. So technically, it's not been adopted, so we can't give it any more than obviously the weight we've put in the report, which is limited, but it does show a direction of travel, and the fact that we've got to this stage suggests that, you know, it's been very well considered. Obviously, I think there was some references to possibly the joint court strategy, which has been superseded by the GNLP, as you know. But in terms of the emerging village clusters plan, it is quite advanced, and I think, you know, I think it's fair to say that, you know, we've looked at this site in some detail, and that's why we've got the commentary that we've got in the report on how we've assessed it against the different points within that policy.
Okay. Andrea, thank you. If you'd like to take your place again. And I've got Matthew. Hello, Matthew. So you've heard the rules. 5 minutes, warn you with 1 minute to go. When you turn on the microphone, please give your name.
Good morning, Matthew Rook from Brown & Co. I'm the planning agent on behalf of the applicants. We welcome the officer's detailed report and its positive recommendation. You've heard about the village clusters plan. I wanted to identify that this is a preferred allocation and a suitable location for approximately 40 dwellings. As noted in the update sheet, this has been increased and the size of the site enlarged from the original draft, which was for 35 dwellings. The size of the site has also been enlarged. This further supports the council's view that this is a suitable location, provides sustainable development of approximately 40 dwellings, which will contribute to the council's overall housing commitment, and our proposals for 44 dwellings comply with the requirements of the draft allocation. The committee report identifies extensive negotiations that have taken place on the key issues of flood risk, highways and ecology, and I wanted to go through those in a little bit more detail. In terms of flood risk, our specialist consultants, Royal Haskinen, looked at the details from the Environment Agency, which, as you've seen on the screen, shows areas of the site subject to flood risk. They produced extensive and detailed modelling data of the surface water flow path and of fluvial flooding of this part of the Waveney Valley and the area around the site. That modelling identified that most of the site would be unaffected in all modelled fluvial events and would be located within flood zone 1, which is the lowest probability of fluvial flooding. The illustrative layout that you've seen shows that only a small part of the open space is within potential flood zones 2 and 3. I wanted to clarify that the plans that you saw on the screen were from the Environment Agency. They weren't the details that were submitted as part of our flood risk assessment. And that shows that the site is even less affected by flood risk with the model data. The surface water flow path was mapped, and that also mainly extends across the fields to the west and the south of the site, with only a small section of low probability on the western site boundary being affected. This is also shown as open space on the illustrative site layout. Therefore, no dwellings or access road is affected by the modelled surface water flow path. The Environment Agency and the lead local flood authority obviously considered these details extremely carefully, and after further requests for evidence, ultimately accepted the approach and have raised no objection to this application. In terms of highways, you've heard from Richard about the extensive off-site improvement works along the street. These proposals now include additional areas for on-street parking, reduced speed limit, improved pedestrian connectivity, footpath widening, improved access to bus stops, provision of a new bus stop, a new crossing point to the services site, and a temporary construction access road directly off the street for heavy construction vehicles, which will avoid Daisy Way. These proposals provide pronounced improvements to highway safety and improved sustainable choices for the existing and future residents of Gillingham. The Highway Authority, once again, have considered these details and raised no objections subject to conditions. In terms of ecology, a series of ecological surveys have been undertaken during the course of the application to consider protected species. In each case, the survey has found the proposals will have no significant adverse impact and that mitigation enhancements will be secured through a biodiversity enhancement plan. This will identify the precise enhancements to be secured and submitted to the Council for its approval. In addition, a district level licence will be obtained to maintain any impacts affecting great crested newts. The Council's Ecology and Biodiversity Officer has considered these surveys and agreed this approach, and Natural England has no objections. In summary, the revised proposals and further evidence has resulted in no objections from statutory consultees or council officers on these issues set out in the assessment of the committee report. It's noted the council is currently unable to demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing land, and the NPPF directs that where this occurs, planning permission should be granted unless impacts would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. You've heard of the benefits: the provision of 44 dwellings in a sustainable location, the provision of 33% affordable housing, the land given over to the school, and also the package of highways and pedestrian and cycle connectivity. The committee report identifies some low to moderate landscape impact from the revised development which will occur in the short term, but with the landscape planting that will be undertaken, this will be mitigated over time. Given the long list of benefits that will be secured through the Section 106 and the planning conditions, together with the mitigation that will take place, it is considered that the short-term low to moderate visual impact does not significantly or demonstrably outweigh the clear benefits of the development, and we request that the committee agree the recommendation to approve the outline application. Thank you.
Thank you. One thing came up in there in my head: density. So originally it was 40, it's now 44. That's still within our parameter of density for sites.
Yeah, so we're still working towards that 25 dwellings per hectare that we're meant to under the GNLP policy. Obviously this is an indicative layout, but yeah, the 44 is also reflective of the approximately 40 in the draft allocation, the village clusters allocation, but also, yeah, trying to meet that density, which this would do at 44.
Members, any questions for Matthew? No, Matthew, you got off lightly, so thank you. So, Richard, can you go to the last slide, please, which gives... Yeah. So, considerations, members, looking through there, mainly what we're looking at. So, open to members for thoughts and comments. Michael?
Yeah, I think actually the second bullet point on that list, the proposal to provide the school with space to expand, and also I don't think we mentioned the benefit of increasing the population of the village is likely to increase the sustainability of the school, and that school is currently at a size where it would be at risk of closure just on size alone, and it could really do with being expanded and having some additional pupils. I think in terms of sustainability of the village, I think that is a significant benefit of this application. I'm also impressed with the highway, the highways improvements, which will make walking, cycling within the village much more pleasant and practical, and the crossing to the services I think is very important. So generally speaking, I think the benefits of this application have been slightly understated in this report. I think the balance is really strong in terms of the benefits.
Thank you. Any more? Lisa?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As I mentioned before, we don't have a 5-year land supply. There's an emerging new NPPF coming out, and we've been told we need to build more houses, and the government are proposing a revised presumption in favour of sustainable development, which this site is. And I agree with the comments that Michael has made with the school. We know that was one of the reasons we started doing our BCHAPs for rural villages where they were struggling to keep services alive, going, because having young people families moving into rural areas. So I'm quite happy with this application.
No. So recommendation, we'll go to the recommendation. Authorise Assistant Director of Planning to approve subject to conditions. Any updates needed following the publication of the new NPPF, together with the completion of a section 106 agreement, addendum, ecological survey or submission and approval relating to the temporary construction access road and receipt of a district level licensing impact assessment and conservation payment certificate. All those in favour, please raise your hand.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Yeah. So, just before we move on to number 3, we have a quick 10-minute break.